The first thing Grace said when she stepped into her own kitchen wasn't a scream, wasn't even a demand. It was just one sharp question. Who are you? And why are you in my kitchen? And I swear, the silence that followed was heavier than any punch she could have thrown. Three women froze mid-giggle. One dropped a glass. Another laughed nervously like she was caught sneaking cookies. And the third looked her straight in the eye and said, "You must be the maid." And Grace, with that calm smile that carries more weight than shouting ever could, replied, "No, I'm the wife." Yeah, that happened. And from that second on, the whole room shifted, like gravity decided to rearrange itself. See, Grace wasn't even supposed to be there. She'd planned this 3-week trip to Italy, a break from Ethan, her husband, a chance to breathe, to write, to maybe remember who she was outside of being Mrs. Hamilton. But somewhere around the 5th night, she woke up with this weight in her chest. Not fear, not loneliness, just instinct. She booked the earliest flight, told no one, not even Ethan. And when that cab rolled up in front of the townhouse with the blue shutters she'd picked out years ago, she knew something was off. His car wasn't there, but the gate was wide open. She tipped the driver, hauled her suitcase, unlocked the door slow and quiet, and then she heard it. Laughter, clinking glasses, a voice joking about being the wives of Ethan Hamilton, past and future. Imagine walking down your own hallway and hearing that. She entered without flinching, suitcase still in hand, and found them gathered like they owned the place. Wine glasses, silk robe that used to be hers, feet propped on the counter. She didn't need to yell, just asked again, steady as stone, why they were in her kitchen. They smirked, called her the maid, and she set them straight. That smile never wavered when she pointed out the wine bottle they'd opened, the same one her mother had gifted her at her wedding. That's when the room went from cocky to quiet. The youngest tried bluffing, said Ethan told her Grace was divorced. Another muttered about separation. The third whispered she thought Grace had moved abroad permanently. Grace didn't argue. She just started boiling water for tea, because keeping calm was her sharpest weapon. "I was supposed to be gone 3 more weeks," she said. "But something told me to come home." Instinct doesn't lie. Then came the moment. Front door creaking open. Ethan's footsteps echoing down the hall, his voice cheerful. "Ladies, I brought wine." He turned the corner and froze like a man walking into his own trial. 3 women he'd lied to, all staring. His wife, steady with a mug of tea in her hand. Grace didn't scream, didn't throw things. She just told him to sit down because there was tea, and then there was the truth. And the truth was brutal. She played recordings straight from her home security system, Ethan's voice bragging about her being off the grid, while he entertained company, making promises to each one that contradicted the others. One thought Grace was dead, another believed she'd cheated and left, the third thought she was gone forever in Europe. 3 different lies, same man. Here's where the twist hit. Grace didn't just walk in blind, she'd been watching. Every account, every document, every signature in that house was hers. The car, the business, the townhouse, they weren't Ethan's trophies, they were hers. She laid the papers on the counter and told the women plainly, "He didn't steal from me. He offered what wasn't his to give." She wasn't angry at them. She was angry at him. And then she picked up her suitcase and walked out. That was the power move, leaving calmly, leaving on her own terms, and leaving Ethan to sit in the wreckage of his own lies. The fallout came fast. By morning, the locks were changed, bank accounts frozen, the car repossessed, his public image collapsing like wet paper. Grace's lawyer, Charlotte Reed, had been ready for this. Emails, bank records, recordings, all lined up in neat folders. Ethan wasn't just unfaithful, he was reckless, funding his affairs with Grace's assets, weaving his lies through her name. And now, legally, financially, socially, he was being erased. Meanwhile, the women he deceived, Naomi, Harper, Emily, met over coffee, traded stories, connected the dots, and realized just how deep the deception ran. Each of them carried fragments of his lies. One was told Grace had cheated, another was told she was fragile and gone, another that she was dead. The overlap was undeniable. And instead of fighting each other, they chose to stand with Grace. That was the second twist. Ethan thought he'd built a harem of secrets, But what he really built was a coalition of witnesses. Grace didn't have to expose him. He exposed himself through them, and they weren't about to let him spin the narrative anymore. When they spoke, they weren't victims comparing scars. They were women comparing evidence. And that's when Grace became more than just the betrayed wife. She became the architect of his undoing. The cinematic finale came at the dinner table, one last gathering in that house with the blue shutters. For chairs, one speaker placed in the center. Grace pressed play, and Ethan's voice filled the room, lie after lie stitched together like a confession he never meant to give. Every woman in that room heard the same recycled lines he'd fed them separately. "You're the only one who understands me. She's unstable. I haven't loved her in years," and the weight of it sank in. Ethan tried to backpedal, to salvage something, but Grace cut him off. "You didn't betray me alone. You betrayed all of us." Then she picked up her journal, walked out of the house for the final time, and never looked back. Ethan thought he could talk his way out, that she'd eventually cool off, maybe forgive. Instead, he found himself locked out of the house, his name scrubbed from accounts, his car towed, his reputation dissolved. And the last thing she left him wasn't a fight, but a letter, short, sharp, final. "You mistook silence for weakness. You mistook kindness for surrender. You thought I stayed because I couldn't leave. You never imagined I stayed long enough to watch you fall apart. Goodbye." That was it. No courtroom drama, no screaming headlines. Just silence that cut deeper than any scandal could point. 6 months later, Grace sat on a balcony in Florence, sipping espresso, living under a name she chose for herself, running her own consultancy, building a life without Ethan's shadow. No grand revenge, no dramatic collapse, just freedom. Naomi called her once, just to say thank you. Not for revenge, but for showing her that silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it's strategy, sometimes it's survival. Grace didn't need to answer every question, didn't need to close every door. She just needed to walk away with her dignity intact. And that turned out to be the loudest ending of all. So here's the question. Was Grace ruthless, or was she just fair? Did she deliver justice? Or did she simply reclaim what was always hers? You tell me. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because some people will say she destroyed him, others will say she saved herself, and maybe the truth is both. What do you think? Was her silence power, or was it revenge in disguise? When Grace walked out of that house with her suitcase rolling quietly behind her, it wasn't just an exit. It was an opening scene for the next chapter, one she hadn't even scripted yet. Ethan thought it was over, that the worst she could do was slam a door, but the silence she left behind was louder than any argument, and it rattled him in ways he didn't expect. He kept calling, kept sending half-baked apologies, but each one disappeared into the void. Voicemail. No reply, no chance to spin the story. And that silence, it was killing him more than anger ever could. Meanwhile, Grace wasn't hiding. She was building. She sat across from her lawyer, Charlotte, a woman who could slice through excuses like glass, and laid out every piece of evidence. Receipts, emails, recordings, timelines. Charlotte flipped through it all and said the words Ethan never imagined would be aimed at him. This isn't just a divorce. This is financial exploitation, fraud, misuse of assets, and we're going to treat it as such. Grace didn't flinch. She didn't even smile. She just nodded and said, "Erase him. Legally, financially, permanently." Here's the twist Ethan never saw coming. The women he lied to, Naomi, Harper, and Emily, weren't licking their wounds in isolation. They were meeting up, sipping coffee, comparing notes, realizing they'd all been cast in the same recycled script. One was told Grace was dead, another that she'd cheated, another that she was fragile and gone for good. Each story contradicted the other, but together they formed a pattern, a blueprint of deception. And instead of turning on each other, they started turning on him. Grace hadn't asked them to, hadn't orchestrated it, but she knew human nature well enough to trust that lies eventually collapse under their own weight. Ethan, on the other hand, spiraled. He tried to lean on Naomi, then Harper, then Emily, but the words he once used to charm them now sounded cheap, hollow, rehearsed. "You're the only one I've ever really loved," he told Harper. She laughed bitterly. You said that yesterday to Naomi. He stammered, but the echo of his own recycled lies filled the silence. That was the moment they all stopped being his audience. They stopped being fooled. Grace was always 2 steps ahead. She'd locked him out of the accounts, changed the deeds, frozen the cards, but she didn't stop there. She'd planted recorders weeks earlier, hidden in vents, synced to a secure server. From a quiet cafe in Edinburgh, cappuccino cooling untouched beside her, she listened as Ethan boasted to Naomi about how she'd come crawling back because she needed him. Naomi's voice cut through the stream like a blade. She doesn't need you. She owns everything. Grace smiled faintly and typed one word in her notes app: leverage. And then came the dinner. Not a reconciliation, not a fight, an intervention. One table, 4 chairs, candles flickering low. Grace didn't sit. She stood by the fireplace with a journal in her hand, steady as stone. She pressed play on a small speaker, and Ethan's own voice filled the room, a collage of lies told to each woman, time-stamped, undeniable. She's unstable. I never loved her. I just can't leave until the money clears. The women looked at him, not with love, not with pity, but with clarity. Ethan paled, muttered, tried to claw back control, but Grace stopped him cold. You didn't betray me alone. You betrayed all of us. Then she walked out, leaving the house, the table, the man with nothing left but his own echo.by morning. The legal hammer dropped. Charlotte arrived at his door with 2 aides, crisp suit, envelope in hand. Inside, asset termination notices, property transfers, witness statements, recordings, all signed, sealed, final. Ethan argued, begged, protested. You can't just erase me. Charlotte raised a brow and said flatly, actually, we can. That was the moment it sank in. He wasn't a husband, a partner, a co-owner. He was a footnote being edited out of the story. And Grace? She was gone. A new apartment in Florence, a new name stitched together from her family's, a small consultancy she ran alone, no shared passwords, no shared life. She walked the cobblestone streets at dawn, journal in her bag, espresso in hand, not hiding, not broken, just free. She hadn't run away. She had arrived. The final twist came months later, when Naomi called her, not crying, not desperate, just steady. I wanted to thank you, she said. That night in your kitchen, when you didn't scream, when you made tea instead, that moment changed me. I stopped believing being chosen by a man like Ethan meant anything. Silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes it means strategy. Grace didn't answer right away. She just smiled, a real one this time, and said, you deserve to be the main character in your own story. And that's where the story leaves us. Not with Ethan's downfall, not with Grace's revenge, but with a question. Was she ruthless or was she fair? Did she destroy him or did she simply reclaim herself? You tell me, because in the end, maybe the real story isn't about betrayal at all. Maybe it's about what happens when silence stops being weakness and starts being power. So what do you think? Was Grace's ending justice or was it revenge wrapped in elegance?